Oh, there we go. I was having a bit of trouble connecting to YouTube, so it should be starting just now. There we go. Alrighty, I'm gonna share the introduction slide. Nope. Here we go. All right. Okay. Alrighty, we're live on YouTube. And we've got 117 people joining us so far. Hi, everybody who's joined us so far. We're going to get started in about 3 minutes or so. Hello. I haven't got my video going. I'm Jenna from the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. I haven't got my video going because I'm in a rural area right now. Chris also is, he is going to be our guest speaker today. I'll introduce him in a minute, but we are both sort of learning this. So we're going to be trying a couple new things out. Bear with us as we learn the technology. And if anybody either of us drops out at any point, we promise we'll be back very, very soon. And let's say hi to some folks in the chat. So in the chat, hi Leo. If you want to introduce yourselves in the chat, by all means, go ahead. I'm going to send a message to everybody. Hello. We'll get started. There we go. Hi Kim. Yes, Tristan, you're all muted. So in a webinar like this, everyone who's joining in as a participant will have their microphone set on quiet, and then the presentation will be given by Chris mostly today. So you'll be able to listen in, but you can answer the chat. You can also answer polls and ask questions. There's a Q&A section for anybody who wants to ask a question. We'll be answering them as we go along. I'm actually going to start off with a poll to see how many of you have already had experience with Stellarium. So if a poll should pop up on your screen if you guys want to give it a vote, and we'll see how many of you have used Stellarium before and how many are brand new. Hi Sheila, hi everybody who's joining us as well. Great to see you all here. You're welcome to keep chatting in the comments as well. Stellarium is a really great program because it is open source and it's free, and it's able to run on every platform. So that's why we've chosen it today to focus on.
Oh, I can't vote.
Sorry, Chris. What's your answer,
My
Chris?
answer would be yes, all the time.
Oh, good. I'm glad since you're going to tell us about how to use it. Okay, this is great. Okay, I'm gonna close voting in about 5 seconds. So anybody wants to throw their vote in quickly, go for it. And we're gonna give you 3, 2, 1, and poll. Okay, so that's great. About over 90% of you are using this more or less, early days for Stellarium. A lot of you, more than half of you for the first time. So it's going to be a great learning experience today. We'll get lots of time on it. It's going to be great. All right, we have 1 minute to go. Chris, what are you most looking forward to in the sky this week?
Well, if you live in Toronto, we've got a special occurrence on Saturday night when the International Space Station is going to fly across the face of the moon.
Oh!
You have to be situated on a very narrow strip that sort of cuts diagonally through Toronto, and I will show you. I'll share my screen.
I'll stop sharing mine. You can share yours whenever you're ready.
I'll share my screen and I'll show you the path. So screen 1, share, skylights. And let's go here. And I'll actually recap a little bit about my skylights when we get going. So here's the track through the city of Toronto. If you want the details, then you can navigate over to my skylights, and I'll review where you find those in a little bit. But there's the track through the city of Toronto on Saturday night. I believe it's at about, let's see here. Oh, we've got a picture down below. Here's the scene at 8:31 and about 16 seconds.
Oh, so cool.
So It only takes about a second for the space station to cross the moon, though.
Wow. And someone actually someone just asked in the comments or in the chat, if you'd be able to see it in Montreal. Can you comment as to why you can only see it in Toronto?
So you're dealing with geometry. It's a very precise geometry. So even folks living a kilometer or two east or west of that little track, the space station will miss the moon.
Oh man.
But if you go to a website called calsky.com, or I think you might be able to use heavensabove.com as well. But if you go to calsky.com, navigate to their satellites page, you can actually find a page that has sun and moon crossings of the space station.
Oh, very cool. I just sent the link out to anybody who's interested.
Yeah, there's links there.
Perfect. And so we're going to get started. We're starting with a really exciting thing. I've never seen the moon cross, or sorry, the ISS cross in front of the moon, but I really want to. So welcome everybody who's joining us today. We have lots of people here. Got 187 people joining us. We really appreciate you spending your afternoon with us today. Just to let you guys know, I'm Jenna. I'm with the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. I'm the outreach coordinator. I'm not sending you video because I'm on a rural connection. So I just want to make sure that I can stay for the whole presentation and not leave at any point. Today, our speaker is going to be Chris Vaughan. Chris Vaughan is an astrophysicist and geophysicist. He knows tons about space. He also runs a planetarium in Toronto, and I will send you his website for anyone who's looking for someone to run a planetarium, or when we get back to having school visits. Chris is great at those once the school is back in order. And so Chris, take it away. What are we going to do today?
Well, we're kicking off a series of learning about astronomy and space from home. And I'm going to share with you one of my favorite things to do, and that's to play with the software called Stellarium. And Stellarium is a fantastic tool that a lot of the RASC centers use in their public outreach because it's free, it's open source, it'll run on a PC or a Mac, and if you want to spend a little bit of money, a few dollars, you can even get it on your smartphone, tablet, what have you. So what I'm going to do today is I've actually taken Stellarium off my computer, and we're gonna walk the tightrope a little bit, and I'm gonna install it live for everybody to step you through or walk you through how to install it on your machine. And then once it's running, then I'm going to demonstrate the main controls and show you how you can use it to view the sky at any time and date and go anywhere on the world and recreate moments in history and watch how the planets and the moon and things move across the sky and all of that. So let's do that. Now, before I get started, I just want to mention that today's kickoff session will focus on the software and how to set it up and use it. And then once everybody's ready to go, then in future sessions, we're just going to use that tool to talk about astronomy and space in general. So we're soliciting your feedback, your ideas for questions and things that you might want to talk about or dive deeper into. So we'll do things like the year 2020 is going to be another big year for Mars. So we'll preview that, Mars activities and when to see Mars. And if you're thinking of getting a telescope, this would be a great time to think about doing that, to get ready for that. The big planets will be up all summer long for stargazing season. And we'll do some of that. And then towards the end of the session, I'm gonna share with you about a dozen questions that we've set up that can act as an astronomical scavenger hunt. And you can use Stellarium to research or investigate those questions. And if you need to, you can do a little bit of Googling, but I think you'll find that the software is the best tool to answer the questions. And then when we meet again on Thursday, we'll run through the answers and go run down on everybody. So let me just start off by sharing my website. If anybody wants to keep up to date on what's happening in astronomy on an ongoing basis, one thing you can do is you could check out my weekly astronomy skylights, and they're posted on my AstroGeo website. And I was just telling Jenna and the early folks that joined about this week's entry that talks about from Toronto, the space station's going to transit the disk of the moon. But I talk about satellite passes and general astronomy concepts and when you can see the red spot, things like that. So if anyone's interested, just head on over to AstroGeo and check that out. But before let's get back to business and talk about Stellarium. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us to stellarium.org. This is the website where you can pick it up. And the first thing you need to do is you need to find out, let me just put the poll away. You need to find out which version of Windows or Mac that you use, and you're going to select from this menu which software matches your computer. So one way you can do that is if you go up to your Windows Start menu, if I can get that to come up here, and type the word about, and check out about your computer, you'll come up with a dialog box. It'll tell you down here, my system type is a 64-bit operating system. And so if I close that up, then I know to go up and grab the 64-bit version of Stellarium for my machine. If you're using a Mac, you can grab the Mac version. And then there's another version that doesn't require you to install any software, and that's called Stellarium Web. And it's okay. It doesn't do nearly as much as the full download, the full installed version does. We can look at that maybe at another time. But so what I recommend is you don't do this right now because it could take a few minutes for the software to download. It's about 250 megabytes. So I went ahead and I downloaded it earlier. And that's what this little icon here is. This is the Stellarium software. So I'm going to just launch the executable. We'll all cross our fingers and hope that it loads up and everything cleanly.
Just to let folks know as well, I've been a little bit in and out. Sorry about that, Chris. But if anybody has questions as we go, please do ask in the Q&A, and I will bring them to Chris's attention as he's going. You can ask them in the chat as well if you'd like.
Yeah. Now, one thing you can do is that one of the really interesting things about Stellarium is that you can actually operate it in dozens of different languages. So I'm obviously choosing English for me, but you could run it in French or Spanish or even Chinese or Hungarian or any language pretty much you could think of. It says, welcome to the setup. I'm going to click next. I'm going to click on accepting the EULA, the end user agreement, and say next. And then I'm actually on my machine, I'm putting my Stellarium on my D drive, but you can put it in your default. Actually, let's do this. Browse and go to the D drive and go to Stellarium. But yeah, you can put it on your C program files directory if you want to, no problem. Let's cancel that. I'm just going to put D:\Stellarium.
So there's just a question in the chat, which I'm going to address quickly, which was where can we download this from? If you just go to stellarium.org, I've sent out the link in the chat. You can download it from there.
So you can basically leave the questions that it poses here. It's just asking you if you want to create a desktop icon and things like that. You can just say yes, and then hit install.
So far, so good on the technology.
Hey, don't jinx us.
Sorry. Gotta be careful here. How long have you been using Stellarium for, Chris?
Well, about 2014 or so, the RAS Toronto Centre started to operate programs, had been operating programs at the David Dunlap Observatory for a number of years. And I joined the society and basically joined that team and started working at the DDO as a volunteer with them. And we actually went about setting up a special room in the administration building of the DDO, where we took a pair of projectors and filled the entire wall of the room with Stellarium, and we called it the Skylab. And so I started writing, weekly, monthly, what's happening in the sky for our presenters to use in the Skylab. And that's when I really got into using Stellarium, and now I use it all the time, every day.
Oh,
all
wow.
right, so we're here, it's ready for us to click go. We can launch it or not, but I'm just gonna click finish. And now I've got a Stellarium icon somewhere on all my screen here. There it is. There's my Stellarium desktop. I'm just gonna click it and fire it up. By the way, we're using this version 0.19.3. That's the latest version. It updates from time to time. You just have to remember to go back to the website, grab it, and reinstall it. And when you do that, it'll remember your previous settings, so it won't ruin any of your customizations or anything like that.
So
it worked.
Yay, hooray.
We're up and running. So let me just give you a quick little, an idea of how it works. So you've got 360 panorama of sort of a simulated horizon, and you've got a daytime sky. It's actually fired up, showing me the current sky, and it used my browser or my PC location service to figure out what coordinates to use. So it's showing me Richmond Hill is my nearest internet provider. So it's got me sitting in Richmond Hill, and it's showing me the sky right now in Richmond Hill. And you can see along the bottom here, it indicates my location. It indicates the field of view of sky I'm looking at, 60 degrees of the sky. It's FPS, we don't worry about that too much. It's just the way the rate that animations are working. And then down here, I've got the year, the month, the day, the hour, the minute, the second. And it also is telling me the my difference from universal time or Greenwich Mean Time. And you can see I can take my mouse and I can click and just drag the sky. And then I can use the wheel on my mouse to zoom in and zoom out. So I can zoom out and see, if I wanted to, I could go all the way and see the whole sky all at once, or I can zoom in on any particular direction. Okay. The other neat thing you can do is if you point at an object and click, it actually gets some crosshairs on it, and then some information about it will come up. And if you go down and hit the space bar, the software will lock it in the middle of your view. And so if you roll in and roll out, you can zoom in on the object and zoom back out. Now you're wondering, well, Chris, that's great, but we can't see any stars in the daytime. How are we going to see the nighttime sky? So to get rid of my information about the sun, I'll just right click, that takes that off, and I'll go into some of the settings. So if you mouse along the left-hand side, a menu will reveal or will appear until you take the mouse away. And I'm just going to go through what these are, and then we'll open them up and look a little deeper into them. So we've got the location window. This is where we can set different parts of the world that we're viewing the sky from. We've got a date and time window. We've got sky and viewing options window. And then we've got a search window. This will bring up a box for us to type in names. We've got configuration window. We've got astronomical calculations window, and this will do things like bring up graphs of how high objects are in the sky, or how bright or how dim they'll get over the course of the year, things like that. They're great for planning observations and things like that. Then there's a help box, and then that's it for this list. And then along the bottom here, if I mouse down, this pops up, and you can see I've got a bunch of icons along here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the box up here first. I'll bring up the location window. And as I said, it's actually dropped a pin near Richmond Hill, but I could actually type in any city or location I want in here. If I were living in Denver, Colorado, I could type in Denver, and it would immediately jump me to show me the sky over Denver. And see how it's changed down here. I could go to Cairo, Egypt, or Beijing, China, or Sydney, Australia, and it'll actually update the sky. So if I were to go to the other side of the world and go to, say, Sydney, Australia, then it knows that it's already dusk. I guess it's actually dawn. Sun's just coming up in Sydney right now.
Hey, Chris, I just have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you were in a place that's not listed there, can you add it in?
Yeah, so I can take this map and I could drop a pin anywhere on the map that I want.
Oh, great.
If I want to go to Greenland or down to Tierra del Fuego, I could do it that way.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good point, Jen, is one of the neat things you can do is you can type in the latitude and longitude of a location here. Ooh. And so let's say there was a lunar eclipse or something happening, and you didn't know whether you could see it, or maybe you couldn't see it from where you are, but you wanted to know how far you'd need to drive in order to see it. So you could say, drop your pin locally, and you could sit here and you could put the mouse cursor on the degrees, and you could use the up and down. See how the little pin on the map is sliding to the west? And you could keep sliding and sliding and sliding and sliding until the eclipse becomes visible for you. And then you'd know, well, I have to be at least that far west to see it.
Oh, very cool. One last thing here too.
Yep.
Just a couple comments from the chat. The lower bar on Stellarium isn't visible to our screens unless Oh, unless, so if you, for those who are watching with the live stream, you may want to make your your screen bigger so you can see the bottom of it. So you have to open up the Zoom window larger to be able to see the bottom bar. Now I can see the bottom bar as long as you stretch it out a little bit.
Okay.
Alrighty, sorry, back to you, Chris.
Okay, that's okay. One thing to bear in mind, everybody, is that this video will be available to watch later, so that if I'm going too fast, or if you want to remember what I said about how to do something, you can always watch the video later and rewind to that point. All right, so to get back to where we are, we can just reset that location list. And if you've gone somewhere else and you want to get back, you can always say return to my default location just by clicking down here. And again, you could set that up to wherever you want. All right, so now I'm back to it. I'm just going to set, actually, I'm going to set this to Toronto. And then say, I'm going to say, make that, use the current location as my default. Okay, there we go. All right, so here we are back in business again. All right, now, if I open up the date and time window, it opens up this box, and I can drag this out of the way and move things around. And this is a year, month, and day, hour, minute, and second. And you can see that the seconds are ticking by in real time. Now, if I want to change the time of the day, I can click on either the hour or the minute, and I can use the up and down arrows to change the time, or I could change the hour. Do it that way. And in a minute, I'll also show you how you can flow time and fast forwards and backwards as well. So let's just set this back. So you can do that. You can set this to different times and dates as well. We'll come back to that when I give you some ideas about some cool things to look at to preview. Now you can even just leave this box sitting here for later, for using later. All right, so for now, let's get into the evening sky. So let's set this to, so we're seeing from this that the sun is going to be going down after 7 o'clock tonight. And by about 8 o'clock, the sky is getting a little darker. We can see the planets are labeled up here. And then by 9 o'clock, we're getting into full darkness. So here we've got a little bit of observing homework for everybody, is to head out on the next clear evening and look west. Over the next few nights, of course, you've been seeing Venus there for weeks and weeks. The moon's going to be hanging out there for the next couple of days. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a bit. Okay, so now that I've got a bit of a darker scene, what I want to do is I want to bring up the icons along the bottom. So down here along the bottom from left to right, the first icon here, you can see that these are graphical. There's a picture of stars with lines connecting them, and this is the way you make the constellations appear. So if I enable that, I can draw the constellation lines. If I do the second one, I get the names. And if I do the third one, I get the artwork that goes with them. Pretty cool.
What's your, just quickly, what's your favorite constellation, Chris?
Oh, well, everybody loves Orion. Right? I mean, that would be a poll question, wouldn't it?
Yeah, here, I'll make one. We'll see what people say.
Sure. I would say that in the winter it's Orion, in the summertime it's Scorpius.
Ooh.
And Scorpius is famous for having a hooked tail. And if you've seen the movie Moana, then Maui, he's carrying a hook over his shoulder. And in New Zealand, Scorpius is actually Maui's fish hook.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's how they interpret that constellation. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to rewatch that movie now.
Now, the next couple buttons are to put grids across the sky. So for example, if you put a azimuthal grid, this will show you actually the point in the sky directly overhead. And during different parts of the night, the objects will pass through the overhead part of the sky. And of course, when we look straight up, that's when we're looking through the least amount of atmosphere. And so, you know, if you're chasing down an object through binoculars or a telescope, the higher in the sky it is, the more clearly you'll generally see it. So this grid will let you get a sense of where that zenith is in Stellarium. I normally operate without it. The other grid here is the equatorial grid, and this will actually show you Polaris. So here we are. Polaris is actually located about a degree or about a finger's width away from the true north celestial pole. And so if I kind of zoom out here and face north, and I advance the time, every hour, the stars revolve. As the Earth revolves, the stars seem to circle around the north celestial pole. And if I zoom in on this point, you can see that Polaris actually spins around the celestial pole, as I said, about a finger's width away. That's cool. All right. So that's that grid. And again, you can play with that grid if you want to. I don't normally work with it turned on, but it's fun to know it's there. Okay, the next set of icons here, this one is to turn off the horizon. So if you wanted to see the stars below the horizon, you could make the sky disappear altogether, the ground disappear altogether, and you could be looking at what's below the horizon. So you can see the whole celestial sphere all at once. And of course, the reason that we use planetarium software like this is that, and the reason that we set our location in it is because different parts of the world have different stars, different sky above them at any given time. So the sky that we see in Canada is not the same sky that they see in New Zealand or Australia or Southern Africa. In fact, that's why astronomy tourism is big to go to the Southern Hemisphere, and they like to come to the Northern Hemisphere to hear this famous Big Dipper they've heard about, things like that. The next icon here controls the compass marks on the horizon, so you can turn those on and off. And the next horizon actually makes the daylight disappear, so we can turn off the sun's light. So if I go back to around noon time, and I turn off the daylight, then we can see that Venus is up in the sky, there's Mercury up in the sky, and the planets are up there beside the sun, although they're invisible because of the daylight, because the sun's glow. That's a way you can turn that daylight on and off. All right, what do we got next? For the next one, I'm going to go back into the nighttime sky. Now, the Milky Way actually comes up, I don't know if you can barely see it, the Milky Way comes up sort of through Canis Major, through above Orion, through Auriga, Perseus, and then sort of down through Cassiopeia here. And so that Milky Way galaxy is where many of our famous and most popular and spectacular deep sky objects are hanging out. And I can use Stellarium to map the locations of all those cool nebulas and star clusters by flipping on this deep sky option here. And this plots a symbol and a common name for the various objects. So the dotted circles are clusters, the green boxes would be nebulas, and you might see, let's see if I can get an oval. Here's another, here's a circle with a cross through it, that's a globular cluster. And you'll also get these little red ovals, these are galaxies. So you'll get to know what the different symbols mean as you use the software. And if you zoom in, go ahead.
I was just going to ask how come most of the deep sky objects appear around where the Milky Way is?
Well, star clusters are part of our own galaxy, so that they would tend to be concentrated in the plane of our galaxy in its expression across the sky.
Okay, cool.
The globular clusters orbit our galaxy like bees around a hive, so they can be near a Milky Way, but not exactly in the plane of it. And then the galaxies are completely different, separate galaxies altogether, so they can be distributed pretty much anywhere in the sky. And in fact, what tends to happen is that the distant galaxies beyond the Milky Way, we can't see them because our own Milky Way obscures our view of them. So we actually don't have galaxy symbols distributed along our Milky Way. In fact, we'd have to look away from the Milky Way to see those.
That's very cool.
We can do that by, say if we face, I remember our Milky Way is over here, if we face sort of southeast in the springtime and zoom in a little bit here, you'll see all of these red symbols start appearing. This is the Virgo cluster of galaxies that are hidden, or at least need a telescope to see them.
Ooh.
Near Leo, the constellation Leo, Coma Berenices, and Virgo. So that's what that button does, is it switches on and off the deep sky objects. And I'll show you in a little bit, or maybe a future session, how you can control which types of objects are shown and put more of them on the screen, fewer of them on the screen, etc. The next icon, the Saturn looking icon, this just lets you turn off the planets, the labels for them anyway. So if I've got Venus here, I could turn that off, the label for it, and so on. Now, the next one, so when we look at the sky, the Earth's axis is tilted by 23.5 degrees. So it makes the North Celestial Pole different from the zenith, or different from the Earth's equator or other poles. And this actually switches you to make that regular. So if I put the equatorial grid on here, see how I made the equatorial grid stand straight up and down now, but I made the horizon tip over. And so it's the way we would use an equatorial mounted telescope. So it's not something that most folks would need to play with, but that's what that button does.
Makes it a little confusing to look at since it's not how we
Yeah.
normally view our sky.
That's right. This next one has got 4 arrows pointing towards the center. And what that is, that's your centering up tool. So if I wanted to say, let me look at, let's see, the Pleiades cluster, I can point at the Pleiades cluster and click it, and that gives me information. Then if I go down here and hit that centering button, it pulls it into the middle for me. And then I can keep it in the middle while I zoom in on it. Get an idea from that. Okay. The other way you can center on something is if you click it, if you hit the space bar, it does the same thing. So it's 2 different ways of doing the same thing. If you want to use your computer outside, you can switch into red light mode by using the red light mode here. So that just flips back and forth.
Why is red light better for outside, Chris?
So the unlike white light, red light will not affect your dark adaptation. So if you wanted to see dim objects in the sky, after about 30 minutes, your eyes become the most sensitive they can be to dim light. And that's a chemical reaction in the rods and cones in your eye. But if you then pull out your phone and look at your bright phone screen, you'll actually reset that chemistry and ruin your night vision. But if you shine only red light, then that won't trigger that chemical reaction, and it'll keep your eye sensitive to the dim light.
Very cool.
So
Thank you.
at star parties, we always ask people to please keep their phones put away, or put red film over them, or at least turn their screens down. But using this red light mode will let you continue to use the software, even if you want to see the dimmer objects. Thanks, Jen. That's a good question.
No worries.
You can switch between full screen and windowed by using this button. So I can make Stellarium just fill a part of my screen, or I can go back and go full screen.
I just have a question from 2 questions from people about our views from different places in the world, because we're looking at this from Australia and from here. The first is, do we see the same stars in different countries?
So the stars that you see are shared by everybody at your latitude on the Earth. Because as the Earth rotates once in 24 hours, everybody at the same latitude gets their turn at seeing the same stars.
And
but if you live at a dramatically different latitude, say south of the equator, then the sky above you will contain different stars. Does that answer? Does that answer the question? I think so.
I would say so, yeah. So for example, the stars in Australia are different than the stars here. Even in Florida, if you went down to Florida from Toronto, Orion would be higher in the sky, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And also that means that if you drive south, the farther you go, the lower Polaris will drop, until eventually when you get at very low latitudes, Polaris will disappear from you.
True.
And many of us that have telescopes that use Polaris to align our telescopes to the sky, you can't do that in the southern hemisphere. You can't do it where you can't see Polaris. So they have different tricks that they use down there.
Very cool. And then one more question, which is Australia's moon really upside down?
Yes. Well, actually, if we do these sessions for an ongoing basis, I'll actually devote one session to indigenous astronomy and talk about the New Zealand star lore and different constellations in different parts of the world and things like that. So that'll come up in that one. That's a great question. Let
us know on social media and by emailing me if you'd like to hear about that.
Yes, please. All right, now you may have noticed that I had some meteor showers well, you may not have known they're meteor showers, but these little blue symbols with the labels beside them, these are the locations where meteor showers would originate, or meteors would originate from during particular showers. And that was this button down here. It's a meteor shower icon. And by default, that was switched on. So I'm just going to switch that off. It doesn't mean the meteor shower is active right now. It just means that when the meteor shower does occur, this is the patch of sky. This is the location where those meteors would come in, would be visible or appear to emanate from. And there's also a button beside it which lets you search for meteor showers. So that's kind of an advanced topic we won't get into. The next icon looks like a satellite, and that's because it's allowing satellites to be plotted on the map. And in a couple minutes, so what I'll do is I'll search for the space station and see if we can get that into our view. Now, the final little set of icons here will let us control the flow of time. So it works just like a media player. You've got a right arrow for please play time and forward, or click it to pause time. And you can see when I make it pause, the seconds here in my time, my sort of TARDIS control. Stellarium is a bit like a TARDIS. If you're a Doctor Who fan, you can journey through any point in time or space with it, basically. On the surface.
I like that.
Yeah. So what I've done is I pause time by hitting the pause button, or I can resume it. I can also advance time, and each time I click this, time will flow a little faster. Or I could click at the other one and I could run time. So right now I'm slowing time, and then I'm starting it reverse. So you can wind it forwards and backwards that way. Or you could pause, and then you can use this button here to set us back to now. So this is the now button. So now we're back to current time and the current rate. So those are your time flow controls. Now there's another way you can do this, and this is sort of not necessary to learn this, but if you look at the letters J, K, and L on your keyboard, the K will pause time. Let me just make sure I got in the window here. I should be able to hit K. Oh, it's not working for me, but J should run time forwards. Maybe because I'm in a Zoom session, it's not working for me that way, but normally the letters J, K, and L will let you go flow forward and backwards in time. All right, where are we at time-wise?
We still have a half hour, and I have some questions lined up, some of which I'm going to save for the end.
Okay.
If it's okay with you, if we have time for it.
Anything you want to pose now?
There was one question about Stellarium offering local weather conditions. Does it give you information about whether or not it's cloudy or outside, or whether the atmosphere is transparent, how transparent it is, all that sort of stuff?
No, this version doesn't do that. Some of the other paid software or more advanced software might do that, but Stellarium is essentially assuming you've got a clear sky.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll go on. We'll talk at some point about some of my favorite astronomy forecasting websites and apps on a future.
Sounds good. And then there was one more question quickly from Julie Tomei, which is, how do you unselect an object if you already have an object selected and all the information is up in the left?
Yeah, so you can select it with a left click, and you can unselect it with a right click.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, very easy. All right, let's see. What should we do next? Oh yeah, I said I was going to talk about the space station, but for that, let's go into the evening again. I'll just zoom back out. Okay, here we go. All right, so what I want to do is I'm going to bring up the search window here. And the search window lets you type in the name of a planet, an asteroid, a star. So if I wanted to type in, I wonder where Betelgeuse is. I don't even need to type the whole thing in, although I do have to worry about more than one object with the same set of characters in it. So I see there's a Betelgeuse and a Betelgeuse. So I'll keep spelling it until I get just the star. And then if I hit enter, then it throws it into the middle of the screen for me, and it also brings it up. This is just as if I selected it by clicking on it. So now I've got Betelgeuse, and I can wind in. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us to the star Castor. So if I click that menu again, I'm going to type Castor this time and hit enter. Castor is one of the two stars in Gemini, the twins. And if I zoom in on Castor, I can reveal that it's actually a multiple star. So the closer I get, the more, sort of the more blobs I
So what
get.
does that, so that is that multiple stars orbiting each other?
It may be in some cases, some of them will be line of sight. They'll just be coincidentally in the same spot in the sky, and sometimes they'll be actually orbiting one another. You can usually go down through the list of information here and find out. So I don't remember at the moment off the top of my head whether Castor, I believe Castor is a star system of gravitationally interacting stars in a group. So they would be orbiting in some fashion.
Cool.
Yeah, good question. Another really neat thing to zoom in on, and I'm just going to come down here to Orion, is if you find the 3 stars in Orion's belt, and you can do this on the next clear night, Orion will be sort of in the western sky. You can, I'm just going to turn off all the deep sky objects for a second here to make the screen cleaner. You can see 3 stars in the belt and a couple things that are neat about the belt. And I'm not going to talk about all the cool parts of Orion because some of that Orion's going to be discussed in our scavenger hunt. So I don't want to give too much away there.
Ooh.
But if you look at the 3 stars in Orion's belt, each of the stars is about a finger's width or 1 degree of sky apart. And you'll notice that between the 2 right stars, there's an S-shaped asterism of stars. And you can see that in binoculars, or maybe even if you've got good sharp eyes, you can see that S in the stars. And then on the right, under the star Alnitak, you can see there's a little star that's not as bright, that's below that. And if you point your binoculars at this star and zoom in, you get a real treat. This star is another one of these nice little multiples of stars. So you've got 2 or 3 here, 2 or 3 here, and 2 or 3 here, and they sort of form almost like Cupid's arrow when you see it in a binoculars or a telescope. That's the star. Its designation is Sigma Orionis.
So actually that brings up a question that was just asked in the chat, which is, can you change, instead of having the traditional names like Betelgeuse or Alnitak or any of those, can you change it to the Greek letter names of the stars in any way?
In some cases, you can alter names, but in the case of the stars, what you would do is you'd click on the star, and then it gives you the proper name and also the Greek name.
Okay, cool.
You can do it that way. Okay. All right, what do we got here now? Back into the search menu for a second. I don't usually use these other lists, these other tabs, but if you wanted to sort of search within a group of particular object types, you could do that. So I could say search for only under galaxies, only under nebulas, and so on. But basically I don't use that, and I don't think we need to learn that. So we'll just use the regular search button. Down here you can actually use the Greek letter button. So if you wanted to search for the star, let's say Delta Virginis, then it gives you the delta, and you just type the word vir for Virginis and hit enter, and it'll pop over there and it'll show you which star that is. So you can learn it that way. So that's the search button.
Just to let you know, Chris, we have a lot of sort of questions, beginner type questions. And I just wanted to mention to folks, so questions like how many stars are in the Milky Way? How did Betelgeuse get its name? That sort of stuff. We will have an Ask an Astronomer session later where I think a lot of these questions would be a good place to get answered, because we only have, we're focusing on Stellarium for today, but I do want to say that we will answer those questions at some point. It's just probably going to end up being another session. Is that okay with you, Chris?
Yeah, that's what we want. We want to know what people are interested to know about so that we can dive into those topics on a future session. We may be doing quite a few of these, so it'll be great to have all these different things to look at.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what I want to do is I want to actually show you a few of the ways that you can actually customize the software and make it the way you like it. So if you go down to the Sky and Viewing Options window, this is where you can control how the various types of things appear in the sky. So you can, under the first tab, which is under Sky, you can control whether the Milky Way is bright or dim, and you can say, take the number here and you could make it bigger. See, I'm making the Milky Way a little more prominent. And zodiacal light, we won't worry about right now. Dynamic eye adaptation, this is what the software uses to try to match how the sky would really look. And so it knows that if the moon is up, that many of the stars would be dimmed because of that. And so right now it's dimming out a lot of the background because the moon is in the sky. But if you don't want to have that bothering you, you can turn that off, and you'll see that that actually helps with that in a minute. You can also do things like have shooting stars. So let's bring up some shooting stars, which is fun. So just make this reasonable. Let's start with 30 for now. We'll see what we get when we do that.
And that number that you're upping there, is that the number per hour that you would be seeing?
That's the, I don't remember the actual rate, but I think it's probably per hour, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
hourly rate.
It's the zenith hourly rate, yeah.
Uh-huh. So for example, with that, if you guys have heard of the Perseids meteor shower, that one is one of the best ones in the summertime. It has up to, what, I would say about 100 an hour, Chris?
Yes, yeah. And very bright. They tend to be very bright and spectacular as well.
Mm-hmm. So that's in August for anyone interested.
That's August 13th, roughly August 13th every year. Now on the right side here, we can control whether or not the stars are shown in the sky. We can also control how big we want the brightest stars to be compared to how small the dots are for the dimmest stars. And you can play with the absolute and relative scales here to change that if you want to. We can control whether the stars twinkle or not. Right now I've got that set to be on. And you can control how many stars get labels on them. So if I increase the slider, you can see lots of stars get labels. And if I turn this back down, I just have the main stars labeled. And the more you zoom in on a place in the sky, the more stars labels will appear. And so you can sort of set this the way you like it. So you have quite a few, but not a crazy number of labels so that you're cluttering up your sky.
Just a quick question, because there's been a couple of people asking about the landscape, and you've got the window open now. There are a couple of people asking if you could upload an image and add your own landscape, or if you could change the landscape. I did mention in the comments that you can change the landscape. I'm not sure you can upload your own image though, can you?
There are tools. So if you go back to the, let me just find the, so there's actually a very extensive Wikipedia for Stellarium with a user base that knows how to do all the tricks and tools that are built into the software. So you can find instructions on how to create your own custom panoramas in Stellarium by just Googling Stellarium panoramas and things like that.
Okay.
We actually, Eric Briggs, one of the Rask members a number of years ago was working with the Starry Night group of people, Starry Night folks, and he created a 360 panorama for the David Dunlap Observatory. Oh. And so we use that at the DDO in our Stellarium. We have the DDO surround in there.
That's very cool. That is not covered in the intro session about Stellarium though.
No, that's advanced. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come out of here for a second, and I'm going to go down to the configuration window and show you that if you open this up, anything that you've set that you want to keep, then you can just click Save Settings, and it'll remember that for the future sessions that you boot the software out. So since I've made a few changes, I just wanted to lock those in so that I don't lose them. And I'm going to go back to the settings here again. So that's changing the sky, the way the sky looks. The next tab is the Solar System Objects, SSO. And so here's where you can turn it on and off the Solar System Object labels. You can turn off the Solar System objects altogether. So if I want them to disappear completely, I can just take them out of the sky by turning off that switch. I can also plot their orbits as expressed across the sky. So if I click this on, all the red lines would be the different orbits for the different planets. And if I just want to see the orbit for a particular planet or object like the moon, then I can click it and all the other orbits will disappear. So for example, if I want Venus, here's Venus's orbit. You can't see it very well. I'm just going to bring up the time and just drop the time back a little bit. You can see Venus's orbit on there. So that's what the orbit control lets you do, is bring those on. The other thing you can do in here is you can scale the size of the moon. So if you want the moon to look, the moon always looks bigger than it really is. You can always put up your pinky finger and cover the moon and close one eye. But if you want to see, you know, how the moon really looks, you can scale it by switching that on. And I've got the moon scaled 4 times reality at the moment. So it sort of makes it look a little more as it does. Just like I can make more or fewer star labels, I can also make more or fewer planets and asteroid labels. So if I increase the slider, I could probably bring up some asteroids. I'm not sure I see any right now, but we can play with this later and see if we can hunt some of those down. So that's your solar system object menu. I want to go over to the landscape. Just unselect Venus for a second here. So under landscape, let me just bring this back to daytime so you can see the landscape. So Stellarium actually comes with a variety of built-in landscapes. So you can pick whatever you think is most appropriate. You can even, because the software will actually let you fly to Mars and land on Mars, you can have the Mars horizon, you can have the moon's horizon, Neptune, Saturn. And of course, they don't have solid surfaces, so you don't see a solid horizon line for them. Trees. And the one that I like to use is the zero horizon, because that's if I want to look at Mercury or Venus and they're hugging the horizon, I want to get the trees and the buildings out of the way so I can see them.
This is a good one if you're near the ocean, right? Because the ocean is pretty much zero horizon.
There's actually one for ocean that's just water around.
Just in case you're lost at sea.
That's right. So while I'm here, so let's talk about the morning sky, because that's where all the planets are these days. We've got about 10 minutes. So I want to get a time for our questions. So
sounds good. We can run over a little bit on questions if you want to as well.
Sure. All right. So I'm going to set this to ocean or zero horizon, whichever you like, and close this up. And remember, if you pick a different horizon and you want to lock it in place for future, then you just go back to the configuration and click save. And that'll remember it for next time for you. All right, so all the bright planets are hanging around in the morning sky these days. So if I set this to the morning, before sunrise, then I've got at 6:18 a.m., I've got Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. And Mercury is down here. Mercury's a little bit too low for us to be seeing right now, but it's there. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. So this is the sky tomorrow morning. Sorry, this is today. Let me just go back to, let's go back to now. So we go back to this morning. There's the sky this morning. And then you can use Stellarium to predict what's going to happen in the sky as you go. So if I sit here and I click on the date, I can see here's this morning, tomorrow, the next day, 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 the next day. And eventually, if I go far enough, I'll get the moon joining the party. So there's the moon will coming back and be visible with the planets Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. I'll just make this a little earlier so it's easier to see. At mid-April, so the 14th of April, if you want to get up and you take a photo of the eastern sky, southeastern sky, you can get a beautiful shot of the moon, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars all together in the eastern sky. The next night, the next morning, I should say, the moon will hop to sit below Saturn. In the morning after that, it'll sit near Mars, and then it'll go off and disappear beside the sun. So that's the morning sky. Now, I wanted to share something cool with everybody. You can try this yourself. So we can use Stellarium to recreate great moments in astronomical history. So here's a neat one. If I set the year to the year 1 AD instead of 2020, and I set the month to November, and I set the date to the 6th, here's the eastern sky before sunrise.
Whoa.
Mars, Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury all clumped together on the 6th of November of the year 1 AD. And if I sort of play with the dates a little bit, you can see that starting around the 2nd, we had the crescent moon there. Then on the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th. Now, the Venus and Jupiter are the two brightest planets. So with the unaided eye, because no telescopes or binoculars were invented in the year 1 AD, Venus and Jupiter sitting so close would have appeared as a spectacularly bright, shining object in the eastern sky before sunrise. And maybe this is the inspiration for the Star of Bethlehem.
Oh,
Because
that's
this is,
really cool.
yeah. So everybody can play around with this and try this for themselves. And you can see how for at least a few days, all those bright planets were all clumped together, and that would have certainly made headlines of the day, if you know what I mean. And maybe come down, you know, all these thousands of years, 2,000 years later.
That's
Cool.
incredible.
Yeah.
So speaking of cool space things that are happening, is now a good time to talk about what's coming up in the next couple of weeks or so?
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. So first of all, the big news this week is Venus. So Venus has been dominating the western sky after sunset for quite a number of months now. And with Stellarium, we can actually see what Venus is going to do. Oh, by the way, there goes the satellite. Can you see it zipping by?
Yeah.
And if I click on it, it gives me the name of the satellite.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I'll right click it to get rid of it. All right, so here's Venus. Watch what Venus does. This is tonight. This is Tuesday night, Wednesday night. See how it's heading towards this clump? Let me just bring the sky a little darker. Here we go. This is around 9 p.m. Doesn't have to be at 9 p.m. I'm just making it a little darker so it's easier to see. So we'll click in a little bit closer. So this is called the Pleiades star cluster. It's also known as the Seven Sisters. It's also known as Subaru in Japan. And actually this group of stars forms the part of the logo of the Subaru car company. In indigenous astronomy, the indigenous North American groups, the Maoris of New Zealand, the Aborigines of Australia, they saw this patch of stars in the sky and they thought it was the doorway to the afterlife. They call it the hole in the sky in some of the cultures. So, but we call it the Seven Sisters or the Pleiades. And on the next few nights, boom, boom.
Wow.
So on the 3rd, which I think is Friday night, then the Venus is going to pass right into the center of this cluster. Now, the orbits of Venus and Earth are on a regular cycle in such that every 8 years, Venus passes through the Pleiades clusters.
Cool.
So this Friday is the night it happens. And you can see that Thursday night, it's not in. Friday, it's in. Saturday, it's gone. So it's really kind of a 1 or 2 night only event. So in a telescope, your telescope will probably cover about half the Pleiades, maybe a little bit more if you have a refractor telescope. So you'll be able to catch the relatively close by Venus and the vastly far away Pleiades. So this information over here is telling me that Venus is actually 0.63 astronomical units. An astronomical unit is the average distance from the sun to the Earth. And so that's about 94 million kilometers. But the star in the Pleiades is actually 403 light years away.
Wow.
Many dramatically distant. So that's a big event for this week on Friday night. On Thursday to Saturday, you can certainly, they'll be in the vicinity, so you can certainly try that. And in binoculars, they'll fit together for a few nights. So you'll be able to see them for, say, 4 or 5 nights. Venus on the Pleiades cluster. So that's a big event for this week.
We have homework for everybody as well, which we'll get to in a minute. But I just wanted to let you guys know that your observing homework, if you so choose, is to try to go and see that conjunction of Venus over near the Pleiades. So if you can, give it a try. Let us know if you did.
Absolutely. So that's it for this week, as well as the ISS transit of the moon for the folks that are in the Toronto area.
Oh yes, yeah.
Did I recap that again?
Yeah, sure. Because we might have some new folks at the end here. Just a quick recap of that one big thing, and then we'll get to the to some of the last questions and to the scavenger hunt.
Yeah, so for the folks that want more information about things like the Venus and the Pleiades, you can go to my skylights and you can get the highlights there as well. They're written up every week. So for the folks that live on this little strip of the city of Toronto on Saturday evening at about 8:31 p.m., the International Space Station will fly over the city, and for about 1 second, it'll actually cross quickly the disk of the moon if you're sitting on that track. For folks that live either east or west of the track, and of course we're all limited in how much traveling we can do right now, then you'll still see the space station either zip, say, to the left or to the right. And it'll be a really, really fun thing. And if you've got, if you want to set up your camera on a tripod or maybe set up your smartphone to record a bit of video or a time lapse, you can certainly see the streak of the space station draw a line as it passes close to the moon.
Oh
So
boy,
that'll
and
be
can you
great
remind me,
time.
sorry, what was that date again?
That's Friday night, April 4th, 8:31 p.m.
Okay.
and 16 seconds.
In 60 seconds, very important. It
Yeah.
will be right at that moment.
Yeah, I'd recommend that if you want to view it through a telescope, point your telescope at the moon, keep it locked in place, and maybe put your phone and run video and see if you can catch it as it zips by.
Okay, so I'm gonna, I just sent out the link to Chris's blog where he has all this stuff posted, and then I'm about to send out the link to our first mission for our webinars, which means this is going to be a scavenger hunt. It's going to get you guys to getting used to Stellarium and how it works. There are a bunch of questions you can answer, and we'll go over those questions in the next session on Thursday. So sending it out right now. There's the link to the scavenger hunt. So give it a try. And now, Chris, are you? Sorry, what's that?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, are you ready to answer some questions?
Yes.
Okie dokie. One of the a question has come up a couple times is, does it show comets? For example, the comet that might be brightening enough for us to be able to see it in the next little while.
Right, let's see if we have it. So when you first launch the software, it comes loaded with a basic catalog of objects. And there are ways to have it go off and download additional objects. So let's just see if the current bright comet is in here.
Not quite.
It isn't. Okay, so what I can do. So the answer is yes. We can talk about how to do that on a future session. Let's see if I could pull this up quickly. Plugins, solar system. Configure. Let's see. Import.
And I'm gonna, while you're pulling up the information, I'm just gonna answer a question from Swapna, or maybe get you to answer it, which is, if one doesn't live in that area, can you see the ISFs over the moon in Stellarium? And I'm pretty sure that you have to get your settings exactly right to be able to see it over the moon, right? So, your location?
So what I'll do is if folks go to the website called spotthesky.com and then look for, this will actually note where you are. So then you go to the satellites tab, let that load. Then you want to look for sun moon crossings. It'll open that page. And then you set the date. What you can do is you can start today and you can say search for the next few days or a week. And then it'll run through and it'll calculate if there's any ones for you. So this is the sun crosses the disk of the sun on this satellite, and we're wanting the before. Here's the ISS, close to Roger, blah, 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 center line. So we can we can get into that in a future session, but basically this is the software you'd use to.
Okay. Would you be able to see it in Stellarium, like see the ISS passing in front of the moon?
Oh yes. So let me just put this away. Let me just search for ISS here. ISS.
Sorry to interrupt you in the middle of the comet question.
No. ISS Zarya. Okay. We're going to set this at 4 at 2031. And you can see it.
Oh, cool.
Boom. So according to Stellarium, using the current orbital elements that are in the software, then the crossing will happen at 8:31, give or take 12 seconds. If we increment this, you can see how fast it goes over. So there's 10 seconds, 11, 12, 13. So 2 or 3 seconds it's gone.
And that's because you're set up to be in Toronto, is that right?
That's right, because I'm set up for Toronto right now.
So then Swapna, if you wanted to see it, you would have to set yourself up where the pass was going to happen to be able to see it in Stellarium.
Exactly.
Okay. Are you ready for more questions?
Sure, fire away.
Okay. Okay, so we've had 2 questions about whether or not you can set up Stellarium to control your telescope and if we plan on showing that.
It wasn't in my original plan. It's certainly something we can do down the road. Yes, in theory, you can do that.
Okay. That seems like a very specific request. And so I imagine we probably won't get to it when we have all sorts of other questions that we want to cover too, right?
We got lots to get to before we get to that. We might want to round up or recruit some of the rascals that are experienced in doing that more than I am, and they could probably share their experience and the little bits and pieces and cables that they would use and so on. So that's an option for a future session.
Okay, so then if anyone has specific questions like that, please do email me. I'll send you my email in the chat. There it is. Email me with the stuff that like the in-depth stuff that you're interested in, and we'll see what we can do about future sessions with it. A couple other questions we'll answer so we have a lot of questions about sort of like big things, like what if the moon were to disappear, or what if the sun explodes, and that sort of stuff. So why don't we save that for an Ask an Astronomer session?
Yeah.
So we're not ignoring your questions. We're just going to save it for a different session. This is a really good last question, I think, if we want to try to end on time, which is, how would I find Venus if I looked outside tonight?
So it doesn't even need to be quite dark yet. You can head outside. You need to know which direction's which. So you need to turn and face west. West is the direction that the sun goes down in the evening. And if you look up, the brightest object in the sky, the first thing that'll pop into view, other than the moon, will be Venus tonight. So you cannot miss it.
It has been beautiful.
It has been beautiful. It's actually on the verge of starting to end its appearance. So in the next number of weeks, it's actually going to start dropping down and leaving the scene. And that's one of our scavenger hunt questions is, what would Venus look like up close through a telescope right now, tonight, or the next few nights? Ooh. So you can either pull out your telescope and find out that way, or you can use Stellarium to zoom in on it. I won't do that right now.
That would give it away. We got to give these folks something to do.
Exactly.
So I just sent out the link again. Some of the questions, again, we will answer in later sessions, and just let me know if you have any specifics that you want to get into down the road. Chris, do you have anything else that you wanted to throw in?
I just want to thank everybody for joining us. I hope we're scratching your astronomy itch. We don't claim to be experts on everything. And of course, the science is always evolving, but we do our best to share what we know, and we're always learning more. And we hope that you'll come back and bring your questions and inspire us to talk about other great things.
Absolutely. And thank you all. We do really want to give you, at a time like this, give you the tools to go out and do this stuff yourself, which is why we're doing these sessions, to give you the ability to plan your observing session and all that sort of stuff. Quick last thing I wanted to throw out, a couple of people have said, do we use the same link next time? I'm actually going to have to change our registration settings because this has been so popular. So please, if you do want to join us for any future sessions, please make sure that you register again in about 15 minutes time. Once I have the ability to reset that, you will have to register for individual sessions, so that if you are missing one, or if you're not able to attend that one, you can open up that spot for someone else to attend. So just that big reminder that please sign up again in about 15 minutes for the next session. And we look forward to seeing you then. Fill out those scavenger hunts and we'll get the answers done for you then.
Yeah, tune in Thursday for the answers to the mysteries of the universe.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
All right, goodbye.